So I've got a couple tape decks lying around that need some attention. My goal is to get these functioning properly again. Buckle up, because this turned into a frustrating saga of questionable design, incorrect parts, and dumb mistakes. But it all worked out in the end. We'll start with this Pioneer deck. I found this for like $5 at a flea market and wanted to get it at least functionally restored. If I succeeded, then it could replace my Sony deck as my main unit for recording, as its specs are better in almost every way. Picked this up a couple weeks ago at a flea market for like, I think it was $5 to $10. This is a Pioneer, apparently it's the CT40, and it's from the early to mid 80s as far as I can tell. It's got B and C Dolby noise reduction on there, and it's all metal, and it feels so solid. But it did not work. When I plugged it in, I hit play and I could hear a motor moving, but the cogs in here that drive the tape were not moving with it. And you know what that means? It means it needs a new belt. Hopefully, there's not more wrong with this thing than that, because that would be sad, and that would be the second time that that's happened to me. So we're gonna open this up, see what kind of belt is in there, and then clean the old belt out of there, and see if we have anything that resembles anything that functions. I needed to get a better look at the mechanism to determine where the belts were located. Yeah, it looks like that's just gonna lift right out. Let's see what's going on in here. To my surprise, the belts looked intact. When we look down, the belt is still in there. It feels okay. So I don't know what's up with that. I ordered a replacement set anyway because old rubber loves becoming goop after aging to this extent. Everything appeared to be aligned properly, but the reels still weren't turning. Here's where this whole project took a turn. This might be the main problem here. This is a rubber controller that's not spinning. Oh yeah, that's the big problem. Man, I don't even know if I have the part for that. I figured out that there's this rubber washer called an idler tire in the front of the mechanism. And it's this idler tire that makes contact with the reels and turns them. This piece of rubber had hardened with age and was no longer grippy enough to drive the reels. The idler is also spring-loaded and was held on with a piece of plastic and an E-clip. I looked online for idler tires that would fit this Pioneer deck. The closest I could find were listings that had long since run out of stock. So I decided to measure it myself and try ordering the right size from an automotive gasket manufacturer. In this case, McMaster-Carr. It was in fact not the right size. I must have measured wrong. It definitely fits, but it does feel a tad loose. Unfortunately. When I remeasured it, I discovered that not only was I 1 millimeter off, but that McMaster-Carr, or anybody else for that matter, did not carry this size of rubber washer anyways. I was back to square one. This is why this video took as long as it did to come out. I couldn't find this part. Eventually, I stumbled upon an idler on fixyouraudio.com while I was looking for belts for my Sony deck. It had no mention of Pioneer or any other brand for that matter, but the measurements listed looked correct, so I decided to place an order. Another week or so later, and I could finally start making progress again. Maybe. Luckily this time, the idler did fit. Oh my god. It fits. It fits. It f***ing fits. Oh my god. This has got to be it, right? Install this tiny wheel back into the mechanism and we're ready to test. If only that were a simple task. First off, I lost the original E-clip due to its size, so I bought a variety pack. I spent hours trying to get that goddamn E-clip in place. I used tweezers, I used pliers, I used my bare hands. Nothing could apply enough pressure for this bastard to clip into place. Eventually, I said f*** it and bought some special pliers at Walmart that were supposedly designed for this exact purpose. The most worthless tool I have ever used in my life. This thing didn't help at all whatsoever. What put the cherry on top of this whole experience is the spring that's involved. Often, I wouldn't be paying attention, and the spring and plastic cap holding everything in place would fly across the room. Damn it! It would sometimes take 10 or more minutes to find these two things so I could make a second attempt at installing the clip. This happened so much it hurts. Eventually, I ran out of luck. Once again, I wasn't careful and I let the spring fly away. Oh my god, that didn't fly that far this time, did it? This time, I looked for those two parts for over an hour. I couldn't find them. Here's what I'm dealing with. So, the spring and the plastic washer are gone. I don't know how. They don't look like they have sprung that far. They sprung far enough away that I can't find them. I've been looking all over this living room for the past hour. This makes no sense to me. It looks like they just rolled off and should be under the couch somewhere. They're not. Like, I've scanned this with a flashlight so many times. They're gone. I'm to the point where I'm giving up on the entire thing because I'm missing two pieces that I previously had. They're in this living room. I can't find them. They're gone. I spent the past hour scanning this entire fucking rug with a flashlight. They are gone. I started at 11:30 a.m. It is 6:30 now. It's 6:30 now. I have spent 7 hours on this. I was very pissed off at this point, so I gave up and moved on. Let's rewind. This Sony TC-WE305 is my first ever deck that I've been using since I got into cassettes 4 years ago. I've recorded dozens of mixes with this thing, and for the most part, it's served me well. Recently, however, it has been giving me issues. The level meter display on the front stopped working properly due to a couple bad capacitors. Unfortunately, the footage of me replacing these bad caps somehow got lost when I got a new phone a few months back. But it went smoothly and the level meter is working properly again. The main issue, however, is playback. A while back, I was listening to an album when all of a sudden, the tape just stopped. It wouldn't start back up again, and I could tell the reels in the deck were not spinning, a telltale sign that new belts were needed. This unit is a double well deck, and I had already noticed the belt in deck A was worn out when I did the capacitor replacement. So I went online and ordered 2 sets of belts, one for each deck in the unit. I popped off the top cover, and luckily the remaining belts were still solid and didn't leave behind any residue. It took a bit of finagling to get both belts installed, but this was nothing unexpected. After a bit of testing, everything appeared to be working okay. I did notice that the auto stop function when you reached the end of the tape wasn't engaging. After playing around with it, I discovered that auto stop now only works when playing back and no longer works when fast forwarding or rewinding. It's unfortunate, but this isn't a very high-end deck, so it is what it is. I put the deck back together and decided for the first time in months to record a mixtape. I loaded in a basic Type 1 tape and made a test recording. It seemed to come through with no problems. I had gotten these new Cobalt Type 2 tapes from National Audio Company and wanted to try them out. So I loaded one into the deck, moved the tape type switch to Type 2, and recorded side A of the mix. Here's where I made a mistake. I had done some speed adjustments to both decks after installing the new belts. They weren't exactly the same size as the old ones, so I felt this was pretty normal. Where I, to put it bluntly, completely f***ed up was not reading the service manual before making these adjustments. I ended up accidentally adjusting the record bias for the Type 2 setting. This is what determines the volume and equalization level for recording when Type 2 is selected. I had thought I turned them back to their original position after realizing that the speed wasn't changing. I did not. This is why that's a problem. I can't believe it. It's distorted. There's fucking electrical problems now. Today sucked, man. In order to fix this, I'd have to turn the potentiometer, then make a test recording on a Type 2 cassette, determine if it was at the right level, then repeat that whole process if it was either too high or too low. I ended up taking a break. The next day, I decided to go thrifting instead of dealing with all that. I came away with 2 finds. The first one was this Olympics Coca-Cola mystery cube. I made a YouTube short about that if you're curious. Link in the description. And the second thing was this beauty, a Radio Shack Realistic SCT-42. So this is like the next day after I realized my Sony deck was not fixed. I bought another one. It's also broken, but in a weird way. We're just gonna see. It's got a super nice vacuum fluorescent level meter display, auto reverse, and Dolby B and C noise reduction, which is a nice bonus. $30, but with a catch. The motor would spin, but the reels would not.
How do you keep your pants up when you're performing? It's incredible. Bill.
Interestingly, fast forward and rewind worked, but playback in either direction was a no-go. I was so fed up with the results of the Pioneer deck, which had a similar set of features, that I caved and bought this one too. I opened it up to check, and there was definitely the remains of a belt stuck around 2 flywheels.
That is a snapped belt.
Initially, I had trouble tracking down the belt for this one. Eventually, I discovered that Radio Shack had actually taken a Hitachi model DRV7 cassette deck and rebadged it under their in-house audio brand Realistic. It was then that I was able to find an affordable drive belt for the DRV7 on vintageelectronics.net, a charming website with belts for a whole bunch of retro audio equipment clearly designed in the olden days of the internet. Am I the only one who misses when most websites looked like this? After another week of waiting, I received yet another belt in the mail. I was a little skeptical this one would fit given my prior experiences and the fact that it was technically for a different model, although I looked up documentation for both the Hitachi and Realistic models and have confirmed them to be identical. The service documentation I was able to find was also instrumental to the belt installation. There's an exploded view diagram of the entire cassette mechanism that I was able to use to determine the belt path. Useful stuff. Wouldn't it be nice if new products got the same treatment? These service manuals are almost an art form with how detailed they are. Before I could install the new belt, I needed to get the decayed remains of the old belt out of there first. Unfortunately, the old belt had become a sort of sticky paste that was pretty much everywhere. It took a good hour to get everything cleaned out.
Alright, we're going handheld for this. So this brass wheel on the end of the motor here was all covered in gunk. This flywheel down here was all covered in gunk. This second flywheel here was covered in gunk, and you can even see a contrast between where the belt was sitting for all that time. There's a whole gap here where you can see the belt was in one position, and that was probably the section that the belt was stretched over the other pulley for. And you can see there's a spot on the brass piece that's like that too, where you can tell that it was just sitting in one specific position for so long, and eventually it just decomposed due to sitting for so long in the same place. But I got it all cleaned up. Now I gotta figure out how to get the new belt down in there and stretch it around all the right parts. So I'll get this set back up on the tripod and see how that goes.
With some time, extra disassembly, and a bunch of patience, I was able to thread the new belt into place.
Let's push this one more time and see what happens. Looks to me like everything's moving properly, at least so far. We'll reconnect the front panel and see what happens, man.
Now we are finally at a point where we can test things. I put a tape in and hit play.
Hit play.
Nothing.
Stop. Play. It's not doing anything now.
Fast forward and rewind weren't even working anymore.
What the did I do?
I tracked down the issue to this gear assembly here. I did not pay attention to how it was assembled before removing it. Go figure. It took a minute, but I figured it out and reassembled the deck just enough to test everything. I hit play once again.
Oh my god. It's actually moving.
This time, success.
It moves in both directions. No f***ing way.
Both directions turned smoothly. Fast forward and rewind function normally, and I could see audio going through to the VFD on the front. With all of the mechanical issues resolved, I was finally at a point where I could hook this thing up to some speakers. The results? Fantastic.
Holy shit, it works. I'm so happy right now.
I couldn't believe it, but after all this time, I was finally at a point where I could reassemble the deck. Boy, this thing is just neat looking. This thing is a massive upgrade over my Sony deck. I'm demoting this guy to playback only. Then this happened.
Okay, you're not gonna believe this. Right here on the carpet, this motherfucker. It is not until I get another tape deck and fully fix it that I find this bitch. Still have no idea where the spring is. This is just a giant middle finger, is what I'm feeling this is. Ain't that ridiculous?
As it stands, I couldn't be happier. While this whole saga was frustrating, I ended up with a really nice deck in great condition, with more features and better build quality than what I had before. Maybe at some point I'll bother to fix the bias problems on the Sony, and maybe, if the stars align, I'll find Mr. Spring and continue repairing the Pioneer. But at this point, I am extremely satisfied with my realistic deck, and I don't feel the need to continue working on these other ones. And that's it. It's finally over. I actually fixed a thing. Properly. I'm amazed. Stay tuned, because I've got a huge list of similar projects for the various pieces of old garbage I happen to collect. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.